Welcome to Philly Fortune Talks with your host, Jake Penny, where the city's brightest minds share the secrets behind their success. Are you ready to be inspired?
In this episode, we welcome Rich O'Neill, a seasoned real estate investor with over 8 years of experience who has built an impressive portfolio of over 40 residential units valued at more than $5 million. As the founder of Fleming Project Management, Rich not only excels in his own investments, but also dedicates himself to coaching aspiring real estate investors, particularly in the property renovations. Recognized by Inc. 5000 and Philly 100 as one of the fastest growing private companies, Rich is committed to helping others achieve financial independence through real estate. Join us as Rich shares his journey, insights, and strategies that have propelled him to the top of the real estate game. Rich, it's a pleasure to have you on Philly Fortune Talks today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for such an impressive intro.
Thanks. So, you started can you start how, you got into real estate investing and, how it's motivated you to build a portfolio of over 40 units and where Fleming Property Project Management comes into play as well?
Yeah. So I started in college. I started going to the foreclosure auctions. I just showed up. I didn't actually do anything there. I just wanted to see what was going on. And it fascinated me. So I got more involved in, two of my favorite subjects in college were finance and real estate. I took a real estate class. So, that it kind of lended itself to getting into the real estate game. I grew up in construction, so I had that background as well. And so when I graduated college, I bought my first house, saved up a bunch of money and bought it with all cash and did all the work myself on that first one. And I was literally in there for 80, 90 hours a week for about a month. And I swore to myself, I'd never do that part again. I still have contractors that go through that one property. They're like, what was this contractor thinking? But I don't tell them that I did that work, but so after that, I started slowly piecing out some of the more specialized work, the electricians, the HVAC guys, took on bigger projects, and just started growing it from there.
Yeah, that's funny that you said like you don't tell the new contractors who did that work.
That's right. That damn contractor, they're terrible.
It's funny. A friend of ours, Rob Caldwell, when I first got started in real estate back in like 2016, I had no construction experience whatsoever. Like I was flying, totally under the radar, had no idea anything about real estate or construction. And I bought my first rental, had no idea what I was doing, and installed a bunch of cabinets. Not what a stud was. So I just drilled a bunch of screws into the cabinets, into the drywall. Rob was doing my management at the time, calls me up and he's like, do you know what a freaking stud is? I was like, me? And he was like, all the cabinets just fell off the wall while the tenant was taking a shower. So that was my first experience of quote unquote construction.
Yeah, that's right.
It's funny that you said that.
Yeah.
So, how did your experience in the earlier years kind of shape your approach to investing and project management today?
So a lot of trial and error. Had to kind of figure things out. I had experiences with some of the real cheap handyman type contractors that we've all tried to deal with at one point or another, and realized that they're good for some things, but go with the specialized guys on different things, spend a little bit extra money. That was one of the real big things was learning the difference between a handyman and the general contractor type guys, and the specialized work really. So, as I grew the portfolio, I had a little bit more cash, a little bit more money to actually go put into these properties. And that was a big help. As I grew in the business, it got easier to go spend, 10 grand on a boiler repair or a replacement, or, $5,000 on a roof replacement or something like that. Whereas the first ones, it was like, okay, how do we patch this thing until, we can save up a little bit of cash to do this? Because, I didn't mention this, but after I bought my first property, I quit my job. So I dove right into it with both feet. And so I didn't have the active income to, support both my lifestyle and the big oh crap moments in some of these rental properties. So I had to really scrape it all together and hustle to make it work. But as I got into it more and raised more money and did all these things, it definitely got a bit easier.
Yeah, it's I had like a little landscaping side hustle when I was
Nice.
getting into it. But all like the gurus and like the mentors out there, not all mentors, but most of the gurus like on social media or whatever, they're always like, get rental properties, you'll become financially free. What they don't tell you is like, yeah, you get a rental property, you get two or three, and it's like, oh, well, you're only making $300 a month cash flow on each, and the roof goes or the
Right.
HVAC goes. There goes your whole freaking nut for the whole year on all three properties or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
shit, I don't even have the reserves for this. What do I do now?
Right.
He talks about that.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's funny you said that because I just a couple weeks ago did a presentation with Dig, where we were talking about Dig Diversified Real
Yep.
Estate, uh, those guys. I did a presentation on bulletproofing your rental properties,
Yeah.
and the whole idea was, how do we maybe spend a little bit more money up front, but make some strategic moves at the beginning of owning a property so that you don't have as many of those big oh crap moments. And that was one of those things that I had to evolve into because, I was the guy that on those first couple of units, I put carpet everywhere just because it was cheap, right? And as soon as my first tenants turned over, guess what I had to do? Replace the
Boom.
carpet,
Yeah.
replace the carpet. Then I'd have another tenant come in for 6 months and replace it in 6 months somehow. Like I don't know how you damage carpet that quickly, but they found a way.
Hey, I don't
Uh,
know either.
yeah, it's crazy. But so little things like putting in solid floors, whether it's laminate, vinyl. I prefer not to be with hardwood, but laminate and vinyl are my two favorites. Little things like that kind of came with experience.
Yeah, definitely it comes over experience over time. Because I actually wanted to, come to that, but I host my podcast on Thursdays. Um,
Right, right,
but over the years I've learned how to make your properties bulletproof as possible. And that goes by putting in the extra work and a little bit of extra money up front. So you don't have
right,
to worry about those things. Like don't jump over quarters to pick up nickels in the beginning. Spend that extra money on nice vinyl plank, go with LED fixtures, hardwired smoke detectors, the more the products that are, that can take a beating, right?
right,
And have to be swapped out all the
right.
time.
Yeah, and you and I can talk about this because we've been here before, but it it really comes down to buying a good deal and a legitimately good deal because I have so many clients and former I had a general construction company for a while. I had clients come to me and say, "Hey, I want to get this rehab done for 30 grand,"
Hmm.
and I say, we can do that, but where do you want to cut? And they say, what do you mean? Well, you don't have enough meat on the bone here. So we've got to figure out how do we make this not bite you later, but still be functional now. And it all came down to they paid too much for the deal.
Yeah.
And especially the newer investors, they just, you know, and that's part of why I do the coaching that I do now, and I focus on the construction piece is that the gurus like you talked about, any of those guys, they gloss over the construction part. They like to talk about the big sexy things like raise money, go find deals, like yeah, get it renovated. That's cool. But then like, oh, let's talk about how do you do this, how do you do that, and like all the sexy things, but they don't talk about the construction, and that's where you can get really hurt. And I kept getting these clients in the construction business. They'd come from whatever class they were just at, and they said, "Oh yeah, I know. People were paying 30, 40 grand for a full rehab." And I said, "Yeah, maybe 20 years ago, maybe
Yeah.
15 years ago, or they
Definitely
did a
not on
lot
the
of work
East Coast
themselves."
either.
No, no. So, that I had that conversation too many times, and it was like, okay, I want to start helping people get past that and find deals that work. And one way that I've found to do that is to get the really beat up ones, right?
Yep.
Like I would rather go buy a shell, something that's been completely gutted versus something that, the grandma special, right? And I would talk about this all the time because, you know, everything looks clean when you look at it, but it hasn't been touched since it was built in the 30s, 40s, 50s,
Yep.
right? So you're dealing with knob and tube wiring, lead piping in a lot of cases, cast iron plumbing, like all of these issues that are just going to bite you when they cause major problems when your tenants move in.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree. Like I cringe if I'm not able to redo the plumbing, redo the electric, put a new roof on. Like they're my main things. I take care of all the mechanicals first and the roofs. Outside of that, then we proceed from there. But it's all about buying the deal to where there's enough skin on the bone to where you can do everything. So that
yeah,
way you redo all the mechanics and everything like that. You put a new roof on. Hey, you might not have any big maintenance CapEx things for the next 10 years. You may have little nuance stuff, but the big ticket items that are going to crush you for a whole year's cash flow, they're already taken care of.
exactly. Yeah. And
So what?
now that can be, that can be regional too. Like a lot of the properties that we deal with in the Philly area are developed in, like I said, the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, right before the 1950s. That was when some of the biggest development was happening in our area. But I recently moved down here to Florida. Welcome to my backyard. And the properties here, on average, are built in like the 90s.
Yeah.
So that's a totally different thing. Now my biggest enemy is not the old, plumbing. Now my biggest enemy is making sure my roof is solid for when, the next Hurricane Helene, or however you pronounce it, comes through.
Right.
So it varies by region, of course, but when it comes to like, and that's something else I learned with a lot of experience here is I want to understand the history of the market that I'm in so that I can know what to look for in these properties, right? So Philly row homes, they were built to be workforce housing in most cases, right? And they wanted to put them up quick, cheap, so that they could, provide housing for the labor working in the shipyards.
Yeah.
Right. So quick, cheap, they weren't designed to last as long as they have.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got to go in here and fix everything now. So that's some of the issues with row homes. You also get into some with Delaware County where that used to be, quote, the main line, right? Where people would come, the wealthy people would come out of Philly and build themselves an estate, a mansion, these big houses in, again, the 30s, 40s, 50s. Now you're taking these big monster houses and chopping them up into little tiny units that don't make any sense. You're just trying to jam as many units in there as you can so that you can call it a 6-unit building instead of a old dated mansion, right? So now that brings its own problems, right? HVAC doesn't make any sense because nobody did the right load calculations. Plumbing is all shoddy. They've just got, pressure water running everywhere and it's not metered and like all these other issues. So understanding your region, understanding the history of that particular neighborhood can be really helpful as far as figuring out how and what you need to do with renovations, I think.
Yeah, it totally kills me when you get those big ass houses and they convert them into like a 5-unit or 6-unit. They're all 1 bedroom efficiencies or, call it just a true 1 bed. And, plumbing is running every which way. Electric's all in entanglement. And it's just like, make it like a 3-3 or make it like a triplex with 2 2s. Like, don't do 1 bedrooms or efficiencies. It's just a pain in the ass. Where's
Right.
the headache?
Yeah.
It's annoying.
We did one for a client where nobody clearly ever knew this, but we figured out that one unit's panel was powering another unit's air conditioner.
Wow.
And then that unit was powering a different unit's boiler. And it was like just this hodgepodge of electric running here. It's like they found a wire in the wall and just grabbed it
Junction.
and
Yep.
junctioned onto it and threw something on it. They didn't care where it was coming from. Right. So now the first floor tenant's paying for the air conditioning on the third floor, and they're wondering why their electric bill's $300 a month.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah. So
Wow.
goofy stories there.
So what inspired you to start Fleming Property Management, and what gap did you see in the marketplace that you wanted to fill?
So I started, um, I started the construction company because, again, I had all this experience doing all this work on my own projects, and you know, I could not find anyone that was doing some of the things that I was doing in mine. And all the contractors I dealt with were either too expensive
Hmm.
or they were too cheap, right? So you've got the guys that are advertising on the radio down to the guys that don't even have numbers on their van. Like, you know, and there wasn't a whole lot in the middle. So what I wanted to do was provide a service to guys like you and me that could help us get the most out of our properties, our rental properties, specifically. And that went well for several years. And then life changed. We decided to move down here, but we also I ended up spending a lot of my time in that business really coaching, and I would spend a lot of time talking to clients about what are the best materials to use, how can you save money on this, how can we just different little tactics and strategies that we can do, that we can implement to get the most out of the property. So when we decided to move, it became more of a question. I can refer business to a lot of the subcontractors, but I would rather go and empower my clients to be able to go do this on their own 5, 10, 15 times versus relying on me every time to do it.
Yeah.
So now I have that ability to not only do that in the Philly area with some of my clients that have now become friends, but I can do that across the country in most cases, right? There's little nuance to construction between places like here, places like Texas, places like Colorado. But overall, the strategy is very similar as far as effectively managing a project. There's a specific process to go through that I help coach my clients through. And there's these little tricks that are universal, right? You don't have to be in Philly to know to put laminate floors down or to know to use LED light fixtures. Like those things can happen all over. So that's kind of why we've gone in this direction, not only for my personal life, but also to help other investors that might not be geographically located in the surrounding counties of Philadelphia.
So your firm has gained recognition as one of the fastest growing private companies. What do you attribute this rapid growth to, and how have you maintained that momentum?
Well, so obviously general contracting is a much higher ticket item than coaching. So we haven't maintained that because of the business shift. But I think the major factors in us getting that recognition for the years that we got it had a lot to do with just sales process. And I was the sales guy for that company. I did a lot of consulting and coaching with my project managers that were actually running projects. But really my day-to-day job was sales and developing relationships and talking with our clients. And that's, why some of my clients have become friends of mine. So I think effective sales process and really just relationship building is what got us there.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense because too many people think about just bottom line, bottom line, bottom line, money, 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 and like you said, relationships got you there. It's
Right.
like people underestimate, or maybe not even underestimate, they just don't care and they just blind it. Like relationships, people, and solutions. That's what charges profits and bottom line. Like
Right.
without those three things, like if you don't want to build relationships, if you don't want to serve people, you shouldn't be in business, in my opinion. It's like
Right.
you're out there for the money. Yeah, I mean, of course, everybody wants to make money, right? But at the same time, it's like there has to be something always bigger than money, right? That the greater purpose, the mission, whatever it may be, in my
Yeah.
eyes.
And that's a great point. I mean, one thing I still talk about because it's still relevant to the coaching business. I really believe that financial independence can solve a lot of the problems that we have as a country, as a humanity, right?
Mhm.
If we can free ourselves from the restraint of needing to work for money, we can then go and do the things that light us up, the things that can help change the world, right?
Yeah.
So, you talk with a lot of, and I've been fortunate to meet a lot of people that have done really well for themselves. And the interesting thing about those people that have gotten to a certain level, they always talk about the things that light them up, the things that actually do good in the world, right? They talk about the organization they volunteer with. They talk about the time that they spend with those organizations. They talk about their kids. They talk about their family, right? They're not so involved in business and in the day to day of getting that paycheck that they forget about those things.
Yeah.
So, I believe if we can help empower people to have, maybe even if it's not fully passive, but make enough to the point where they don't have to work, or they don't have to work as much. They can dedicate more of their time, talent, and treasure to the things that can change the world. So, just as one example, I have a friend that, built his company and sold it for stupid millions of dollars, right? And that friend's daughter is a marine biologist. And, she could have had to go do whatever it is that makes her enough money to eat, but doesn't really, do anything for her, do anything for the world. But he can actually subsidize her living expenses. And he chooses to do this because she volunteers for organizations that help protect sea turtles, protect sea otters, and do things that he believes and she believes are good for the world. And he chooses to do that because he's able to. And so things like that, and there are plenty of other examples I could share, but things like that are really what can change the world. And by having the financial independence to do it, that's really how we get there.
Yeah, yeah. And financial independence is different for anybody from all different walks of life, right?
Right.
Now, there's not like one set size fits all for financial independence, but gives you that opportunity that once you are financially independent to go out and do whatever God's work, kingdom work, whatever you want to call it, to
Sure.
serve people, serve the world, and make everything a better place.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
you,
we had a client that their whole mission and the reason they found us was that they were running a nonprofit that raised money to build housing for refugees that were moving to Philadelphia. And it was most like not short-term housing necessarily, but it was meant to be kind of the first place that they land while they establish a footing in the
mm,
States. Um, and it was run through a Christian organization, and it was really fascinating the way that they did it, because they approached real estate investing from a nonprofit standpoint,
huh.
which was, and their whole model was they wanted and the refugees still paid rent, and there were different subsidies that came through and different organizations that helped with that, but they still had to pay at least close to a market rent, and that market rent would help pay for cost on the property, and then that property could help support more properties that the organization would acquire to then expand their impact.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So it was a really neat organization to be involved with, and I'm glad we got to meet them.
So you specialize in coaching investors, especially in like property renovations,
Yes.
construction, workflow, everything like that. What are some of like the biggest challenges you see investors face? And, through your coaching, how do you help them overcome these obstacles?
I think the biggest problem is just kind of playing whack-a-mole, so
Mm,
to speak, right? So they come in and they know, okay, we want to do this, 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 and this, and they kind of go to the contractors and try their best to portray that vision, and then kind of let it go and see what happens and put out fires as it goes. What they don't what they don't focus on is all the work up front that needs to happen to really explain that vision to the contractor in a way that they're going to understand it, right? So if you can go, most investors will come in and say, yeah, renovate this place for me.
mm.
And the contractor says, Okay. And they go with what they think that means, right? So contractor A thinks I'm going to come in and paint, carpet, replace a couple of fixtures, make it clean, and I'm going to give you a $20,000 bid. Contractor B is going to come in and say, okay, well, those cabinets really aren't awesome, so we should replace cabinets while we're in here, but otherwise we'll do the same. And that's going to be a $30,000 bid, whatever it is, right? Two different bids, but they're not apples to apples. So I think the place to start, and we always start with this with our clients, is a scope of work. And the scope of work needs to be not just kind of bullet up list, right? Like it shouldn't be 10 items. It should be 50 items. And you need to be super specific. I want this flooring in this room. I want these these light fixtures. I want these cabinets. I want this. I want this paint color. All of these things. You need to document all of that specifically. And what I like to do from there is actually put together a bid sheet. And I will say, okay, you need 1,000 square feet of flooring. I need 15 light fixtures replaced. I need 12 cabinets installed. I need you to take down X wall in X bedroom and resupport with whatever, right? All of those things listed out. And then right next to those descriptions is the bid price. So that now all the contractor has to do is say, okay, and by the way, a good contractor should know I charge $1.50 per square foot to install laminate flooring, or whatever the number is. That's just a made up number, but let's just say $1. They should know what that number is, right? So I can say 1,000 square feet at $1.50 a square foot, $1,500. Plug it in. And we got to the point with our contractors that I didn't ask them for bids anymore. I just knew their numbers because they would give them to me. And I would fill in the bid sheet, send it over to them and say, hey, does this still look good? Or has anything changed? And they say, yep, no problem. And they'd get to work. So my goal, like that's one of the big things that people miss, is they just kind of scattershot it and they try to explain things the way that they want to see it, and they don't translate it to the way that it needs to be received.
Yeah.
So we help kind of walk through that whole process and coach them to the point where here's what you need to deliver to your contractors. Here's how you need to be setting up your bid requests. Here's how you need to be running your contracts with your subcontractors. And we go step by step through that process. And really the way we set it up is that we meet once a week from the day that you go under contract, because there's at least 2-3 weeks of work before you even close on the property.
Mm-hmm.
Because my goal is that your demo crew is sitting there waiting for you to give them a call from the closing table so that they can start cutting it out, right? So that's why you need to do the work up front. And then so we meet weekly until you've owned the property for about 3-4 weeks. You're about 3-4 weeks into the project. Then we actually cut it back because most of your work is done. You just need to be checking up on what's going on and making sure that the work's being done with quality, and then following through your payment and all that. But that's all mostly automatic. Most of your work goes in up front.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like relaying what you want down to, the project, to be done at the project, and make sure what you relay to them is what's on the quote. Like that's the biggest thing. Like you said, oh, I want it renovated. Cool. Well, his renovation idea is totally different than what you said, or you said you wanted, a rewire. Well, okay, well, what does that entail? Is that rewiring one room, a few outlets, updating what's not up to code, or, there's a lot of stuff that can get mixed and mingled, especially with contractors. It's never fun having an extra bill in your hand because, you didn't relay it appropriately. And, a lot of people, like, they go back and forth with the contractor. Well, you should have done this. Well, you should have done that. Well, honestly, at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, you can go back and forth with people. But, it's your responsibility to relay what you want done, have it in writing before they even step foot on the job or even start. Like,
right. And change orders will kill you.
Oh, yeah.
Right. If you are not clear enough in the beginning, they might come in there with the bid and you think everything's on there, and it's much more expensive to go replace a stack pipe after you've done paint than it is to do it right after demo.
Oh yeah.
right? So, if they didn't do that and you get a plumbing leak and now you're calling the contractor and saying, what the heck? Why didn't you replace this? They say it was never in my scope.
Yep. I've had my fair share of, you know, sack pipes cracking in my life to where it's a no-brainer that I just do it no matter what now. Because I'm just
Exactly.
like, I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then making sure I have service line coverage on every single rental property I have because I do not want to pay for a $9,000 sewer lateral to be dug up and re-put
Oh,
in.
I've done that too many times to.
Yeah, and it's like for an extra what, $100 a year on your rental insurance, you have service line coverage. It's like it's a freaking no-brainer. A
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Um, but outside of work, you're active in sprint triathlons, boating, personal development. How do these activities contribute to your mindset and success as an entrepreneur?
Well, I've got a lot of energy, so I've got to expel it somehow. I've got 4 little kids that are 6 and under, so that keeps me busy too. Um, I think with the triathlon specifically, and I don't do. I'm not an Ironman. I'm not anything like that. My races take an hour and a half, right? So
Oh.
it's a different kind of race, but it's definitely a discipline building exercise. Um, there are a lot of mornings that I do not want to get up
Mm.
and go for a run, or we're lucky enough to live right on the river now, so now I do my swims right here in the river, which is not fun in the middle of the winter, but sometimes I got to go do it. And it's definitely a discipline building exercise. Some sort of, it doesn't have to be sprint triathlons. I just like that because I like to switch tasks a lot. So sprint triathlon, I go from one to the next within a couple of 20, 30 minutes. But those definitely help build discipline for sure.
So, not that either of us have a crystal ball, but where do you see, in your opinion, where do you see the real estate market heading in the next few years, and how are you preparing to adapt for these changes?
It's a great question. Um, and like you said, I don't have a crystal ball. Um, I think that from a real estate investor standpoint, it's going to be very, very hard to make single family property work over the next 5 years because prices are high,
Hmm.
interest rates are high, competition is still high, and it's hard to make all the variables work in order to get into rental properties at the right price that you can still actually make money on it. And it goes back to that conversation we were having before with, you need to get into the property for the right price so that you can do those major renovations that you were talking about, so that you're not going to get bitten every year with different capex or unexpected repairs or things like that. Because it's really easy to put on a piece of paper that, hey, I'm going to make $500 a month on this property, and you get your tax return and you say, oh crap, I actually lost 10 grand this year. How did that happen? Right? So I've been there, trust me. So single family is difficult right now. Apartments are in what I see is kind of a weird spot. I think there's a lot of money in 1039 exchanges going on, and there's a whole lot of talk of that going away. And if that does go away, I think that opens up a lot of buying opportunity because people are going to have issues getting out of some of those properties that they were planning on holding for 5 years, then 1031ing into another one, right? So I think there's buying opportunity, but I also think it's going to put some hardship on people that are already invested in that area because the values are, I think they're going to drop. I see a lot of potential in developing warehouse space. It seems like we don't have enough of it, and anyone that I've talked to that's tried to lease warehouse space says it's unbelievably difficult to find it because it's just getting swallowed up by all the e-commerce out there. So if you need, a landscape, a warehouse for a landscaping business, or a small warehouse for an electrician, or any of these small manufacturing businesses, they have a hard time getting in there because e-commerce can just swallow them up as logistics facilities. So I think that's a big one. And then from what I've been reading and seeing, there's actually somewhat of a bounce back in retail. And for the right type of property in the right markets, and you have to be super specialized with that. But there's a decent amount of opportunity left in retail. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with rates over the next few years, and that could all change everything that I'm talking about here. But all over the place. Who knows?
Yeah, I hear you. But hey, it was a pleasure having you on Philly Fortune Talks today. For anybody in the audience that wants to connect with you, learn more about your coaching programs, how do they get in contact with you?
So you can find out just about everything you need on the coaching, down to pricing, on FlemingPM.com, FlemingProjectManagement.com. And that'll tell you everything there. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram. Those are kind of the two places I spend a lot of time. Bigger Pockets as well. So
Awesome, Rich. Well, it was a pleasure having you today.
All right. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks for tuning in to Philly Fortune Talks with Jake Penny. Inspired to share your success story? Visit phillyfortunetalks.com/guest and let's inspire together.